Okay, if you open the text, we're on page 19, the very first chapter. And we're starting with the second paragraph, page 19. So what's happening now, just to catch us up, is the Sixth Patriarch Hui Neng has been in hiding, I think we said for 6 years? 7, 15? 15 years he's been in hiding, living among hunters in a remote area. He's decided now it's time to come out and pursue his mandate, his mission, so to speak, both from his own heart and from his teacher, confirmed by his teacher, that he's to go out and teach and transform and share this Dharma with whoever has conditions with him. And so his first part of this is to go to this temple, Dharma Essence, Fa-Xing Monastery, where a very reputable master was teaching the Nirvana Sutra. It happened to be teaching the Nirvana Sutra at the time, Master Yinzong. And as soon as he gets to the monastery, he has this encounter with these two monks who are having this debate, and we went over this last week. And at this point, he stops their argument with this very direct teaching, and then it says everyone was startled. So he kind of shakes everything up a little bit here. Now, the word of this obviously spreads very quickly in the monastery that this stranger has arrived. And we know his appearance was quite different, especially now. You think he's just coming out of the mountains after 15 years with hunters. I don't know how many of you have spent time in the mountains. No, I don't mean at a AAA resort. I'm talking about like backpacking. How many people here backpack? How many people have backpacked for a couple weeks? Less hands go up. How about a week? Okay. If you're familiar with backpacking, you realize that after you go on the first or second day, you start to feel a little grubby and not quite your comfortable self. By the fifth or sixth day, unless you're able to bathe in cold streams and lakes, you're smelling a little different, and your clothes are a little, and the good food's gone that you brought in. The brownies are all gone. You may need peanut butter left, and now you're down to rice and nettles or something, and your freeze-dried food. And you just extrapolate this to 2 weeks to 3 weeks, perhaps a year. How about 15 years? So after 15 years of living in the mountains, sort of in a backpacking type of existence, tents, lean-tos, drinking from the streams and so forth, you develop a certain demeanor, a certain appearance that is not polished, it's not refined. And he appears at the door of the monastery. Again, now he has a habit of appearing at monastery doors in a rather unseemly way. The first time he comes into the fifth patriarch, he's just come from gathering wood. That was his occupation, and he got there in a hurry. He was frantic, and then they had this incredible dialogue right at the door. And now he comes to this monastery, a similar condition. And this matches, I think, I developed this idea that sometimes the real teacher, the enlightened or the awakened sage, appears and talks and manifests almost in 180 degrees opposite the conventions or the expectations. And this isn't just sort of a style. I think it's speaking to a deeper idea or deeper principle that for someone to be awakened and to be really in touch with the way will often put them at odds with the flow of the world, the way the conventions go. And so in many ways, if you have a society where wealth and privilege and prestige are the markers of success, By contrast, the sage or the enlightened person will be manifesting more humble and won't have the prestige and won't have the marks of success. If it's material, they won't have the marks of material success. If it's literary, they won't have the marks of literary success. So in this society, you have a very pronounced division between the wealthy and the poor, the refined and the coarse, and of course you also have this division between the sacred and the profane. In other words, the religious clergy are the sacred, and the profane is someone like Hui Neng. And then the clothes go along with this, and occupation defines you. So in every way, this guy, I'm sorry to use that language, this sage is somewhat of a misfit or a nomad. He's wandering, he doesn't have a place, he doesn't have a home. And it's sort of the idea that to be awakened in a society that's not awakened means you're going to appear quite different than the ordinary. And this also reinforces the sort of solitude of these individuals because they're not after these things. They don't cling and attach when they meet them. They just sort of flow through. The early texts talk about the early bhikshus as deer wandering in the forest, just going from grass to grass, field to field, and not encumbering themselves with possessions and so forth. But this is a mental as well as a physical state. So he appears here, and of course, not only does he look different and all of that, but then he doesn't have the sort of polite talk, hi, how you doing, where you from, I just came from the woods, blah, blah, blah. He just goes right to it. He hits these two guys right over the head and says, you know, it's not the flag that's moving, the pennant's moving, your minds are moving. Whoa. And so that startledness shakes the monastery, and Dharma Master Yun Sung hears about it. So here's where we start tonight. Dharma Master Yun Sung invited me up to the dais, and we put in brackets here, seat of honor. Sometimes a dais can be as simple as this stool here, but usually it would be up here. Or a dais can be, I don't know, I can't turn, my yoga is really getting old here. Is there a dais up there? No? Since you don't know what it is, how would you... Oh, that's like a podium. Yeah, a podium is something you stand behind. A dais is something you sit on. So it's like a somewhat adorned, bigger chair, usually beveled so the teacher can sit in the meditation posture while lecturing.
It's back there behind the bookshelves.
Oh, okay. So if you want to see the dais later, don't sit on it. You go behind there, and there's one there. And that's an official lecture seat in the Buddhist tradition. But the master traditionally, the nuns, monks, who's ever lecturing, sits on it rather than stands. And they sit on it not just because of the way it's set up, but because lecturing from that sitting posture maintains a kind of mindfulness that isn't there just simply by standing for someone who's not really accomplished. So it helps maintain a kind of presence and decorum when you're lecturing. That's the dais. And of course, I mentioned earlier, sometimes this is referred to, the dais is on the platform, a little bit elevated because according to the Vinaya, a Dharma master who is teaching should be in a slightly honored, elevated position, slightly. It doesn't talk about, scaffold, Burning Man kind of thing, just, up about, a little bit above. This thing of respect, and so that's where the title comes from. The Platform Sutra is the platform which he gave these talks or lectures from. So he was invited to sit up on the dais. Now this is, you think about this, wow. He comes in, and the Dharma master, who is the head of this place, immediately invites him to give talk and lecture, not just sort of talk and sit in the kitchen and talk. I would feel a little nervous, I mean, maybe you would too. You just arrive and you say something you thought would catch everybody's attention. They say, oh, you got our attention now. We'd like to hear more from you. And I'll tell you, sitting on the dais is not all it seems. You might think, I'm just going to go up there and sit on the dais. But when you sit on the dais and then someone circumambulates you with incense and bows and respectfully invokes you to teach, there's a little sweat that occurs. It's a hot position. And you might think it's sort of a position of honor, and it quickly turns into a position of responsibility. And so everybody's listening attentively, and there's a sacred atmosphere. So their way of listening is much more deep than sort of listening to a State of the Union. And so...
Can you consider hot seat as a translation?
Well, hot seat. Yeah, we could do a little colloquial. He sat on the hot seat, the seat of honor, where he questioned me closely about the deeper meaning behind my words. Now, he didn't just go up there to sit and hold forth. Dharma Master Yun Sung, who is the lead person here at this temple, then begins to question him, ask him, pepper him with questions. Now, we don't have a record of what the questions were. This would be absolutely fascinating. And he says, a question me behind my words. I'm assuming, from what we're doing with the text here, behind my words is the words that he spoke to these two monks when he came in. In other words, what do you mean by mind? What do you mean by moving? You know, what's the relationship between the material world and consciousness and so on and so forth? What are you talking about here? And all we know is he said he noticed that my responses were direct, concise, and did not come from written text. Now, this is a very interesting line. They were direct, in other words, just really straightforward and accessible. They weren't sort of convoluted, mystical, mystifying kinds of expressions. The kind of, I don't know, some of you read, so I asked how many people backpack, how many have read any philosophy books? About the same number of hands. It looks like the same hand. So maybe when you're backpacking, you read philosophy. Sometimes you read a philosophy book and you go, wow, yeah, right on. And sometimes you read it and then you reread it and then you reread it. And you read the line over 6 or 7 times, you still don't quite get what it's going at. And then you might jump to the conclusion and say, oh, it's really profound because I don't get it. But it might be that it's just obscure and bad writing. But sometimes we mistake truth for elaboration. So there's a wonderful passage in the Tao Te Ching. How's my tones?
道德经
That's what I meant to say. Okay, in the Tao Te Ching, there's this line, and it's towards the end, and it says, true words are not fine-sounding, and fine-sounding words are not always true. It's a wonderful reminder that sometimes the real true talk, the real true expressions are very direct, almost a little bit hard because they're so direct and not cushioned. So it says his were direct, concise. Concise meaning he didn't babble on. He didn't just keep going. Like reminds me of State of the Union, I don't know why. So State of the Union address, people clock now to see how long a politician can talk. Okay? For example, when they're having filibusters, you ever hear filibusters? It's not a person, filibuster. It's a filibuster is a session where you hold the podium for hour after hour after hour talking. That's not concise. So it's the opposite of concise. In other words, he said what needed to be said and he didn't say more. He didn't say less, he didn't say more. It's just very concise, very to the point. And interesting here, did not come from written text. What do you interpret that to mean? Why is that significant? Came from his own practice. So the words were coming from his own practice, perhaps by his own experience, his own direct understanding. Now you have to remember, although he was illiterate as far as we know and could not read, he still was able to hear the text being lectured. So he undoubtedly, with his quick and open mind, probably picked up a lot of ideas and phrases and expressions that we see peppered throughout here that he'll refer to. He'll refer to the Avatamsaka or the Vajra Sutra. And in fact, the line, let your mind be unattached, clinging to nothing, that's a sutra line that he heard and, of course, used in his teaching. But he wasn't able to read the text. But what it's saying here is that his understanding was not second-hand intellectualized. It wasn't borrowed. It wasn't mediated by somebody else's interpretation. And he wasn't, I think the most important thing, he wasn't basing what he said, the truth of what he was saying, on the authority of texts. This is very important because you can say, the book says, you make a line, the Bible says, the sutra says, And so you move the authority from your own experience, your own direct knowing, to another level, which then either convinces or doesn't, depending on who you're talking to. But the authority here is with his own experience, with his own understanding, rather than quoting text. So I think this is significant, and this is part of what's meant here by this direct teaching. He's teaching to the mind from the mind. He's teaching from his own experience and heart to the experience and heart of others, and not using a lot of doctrine, dogma in between. And so when he talks, he's talking right to the conditions of that audience at that time. Because if you quote text, there's no end. I mean, can you see behind me? I mean, yes, you can. Okay, so behind me are a bunch of books. You see the books? That's called the Tripitaka, the three baskets. Those are the texts. Now, imagine if you memorized or were fluent with all these texts, what you could say. You could quote text endlessly. But would it be direct? Would it be directly from your mind's understanding of that? And would it be to the situation and conditions of those you were talking to? You might impress, you might baffle, you might amaze. But will you therapeutically unlock or liberate somebody? That's the difference. So, in a sense, and we'll see this later, he makes a very radical statement. He says, by the way, all the texts come from this very mind. Whoop. So he's saying the actual sutra text, all of these things, all of these writings, come from this very mind. They don't come from the outside given to us by the Buddha, but they actually come from the human nature and speak to human nature. So this is important because there's actually a division of text when they talk about the teachings of Buddhism. There's a division called has not yet been, meaning not yet spoken, not yet created. In other words, it's evolving tradition. So at some point, someone, Georgia, California, Canada, will be enlightened, become a Buddha, and give a teaching, and that would become part of the Tripitaka. And it hasn't yet been spoken. This means it's an open canon. We use that language rather than closed. Whoa. Okay. So anybody wants to set themselves on that job of speaking the next sutra? No, the heads are going, no. Okay. Yin Sung said, after hearing this exchange, this cultivator certainly is no sort of ordinary person. Long ago, I heard that the Dharma robe and bowl of Huang Mei had come south. Okay, so long ago means how long ago? 15. Yeah, roughly 15 years or so. He heard this whole exchange that happened, that Hui Neng went into hiding, but nobody knows where did it go. And so he's thinking, listen, I listened to this guy, I've heard about this guy, are you that guy? And he says, might you be that one, cultivator? And I replied, you bet, I'm the one. No. He says, I dare not presume such a thing. So he's being very humble and self-effacing here. So he doesn't put himself forward. At the same time, it's pretty obvious that he's the one. And then let's look at the next line. Yung Sung bowed. Wow. This is Yin Sung bowed to who? This layman. Okay? What is he bowing to? Technically, when you bow in this tradition, okay, you're bowing in respect to a Sangha member, and you're bowing to their status and to their life of precepts and so forth. You're bowing to their cultivation. And so monks and nuns bow to each other, and lay people bow to monks and nuns. Monks and nuns don't necessarily ever really bow to lay people, because that's it's just not the way it's set up. But here you have, again, a reversal. And I think this is significant because, as we're going to see in the next couple chapters, on and on, every tradition, every established practice of Buddhism in China, sitting meditation, bowing, memorizing sutras, planting merit and virtue through recitation, wanting to be reborn in the Pure Land, he takes apart and he dismantles. Now, he doesn't throw them out, but he deconstructs them, every one of them, and takes them back to the mind ground. And so here's another case in point, and I hadn't noticed this before. The bowing is thrown upside down. He is bowing to him because of his understanding, because he's embodying the teaching. And so in a sense, Yin Sung already has made a conversion in his own mind and heart, which is very quietly, by bowing to him. And you must think, he's the head of the monastery. What effect does this have on all of his disciples? First you have these people chasing him down because they want to kill him and grab the robe and bowl, and now you have an encounter where somebody says, I want the teaching from you. I recognize you have the teaching. I am bowing in deference and respect. I'm going against the protocol here. And so this really it's a very powerful gesture. You have to realize that in these temples and monasteries, and I know this, America, no, come on. America is not very much sort of super caught up on rituals and decorum and devotions and propriety among different groups, right? Hi, my name's to the Dalai Lama, to the Pope, or to the President. We just hi, how you doing? We don't really do a lot of that. The whole Protestant tradition in the Western world, especially in England and the United States, is based on a dropping down of ecclesiastical authority, a leveling out of the difference between church and state or between secular and sacred. And so even the removing of the icons and whatnot, a part of that tradition also is to remove the idea that the clergy is an elevated group that's an intermediary between heaven and earth. So that leveling, that democratic leveling is part of our tradition. That isn't going on here, okay? You can be not only beat up, but even killed if you don't bow to the emperor, okay? And likewise, if you show not the right deference and respect to different people of the gentry class or so forth, you can also be punished. This is very real. So this is a very, how shall I say it, formal, relational type of society. And for Yin Sung to bow to him, you can hear the glass breaking at this point. This is very significant. But what's happening at the same time, Yin Sung's getting down. You want to use that expression. He's getting down. He is not resting on formality saying, well, I'm the high master, it's nice to hear what you say, maybe we can find your room or something. He is so sincere and so eager for the truth that he's willing to just step out of this role completely at this point. And then it says, he bowed and asked me to show the robe and bowl I was entrusted with to the community. So on the one line it says, I dare not presume such a thing. And he says, yeah, show us the robe and bowl, come on. Now, you could read this as like, let me really see it, because you're saying you're not, but I think you are, but let's see it. But at the same time, he's just saying, I know you are, just show it to us. I just find this fascinating that they want to see the robe and bowl. But given the excitement prior to this about getting it and whatnot, and the sort of the cachet it carries, this is like the, what do you call it, the Holy Grail, right? Not Monty Python's Holy Grail, I'm talking about the real King Arthur, sort of Holy Grail thing. So this quest for the symbols, it's almost like a fetish in a sense, because it's empowered with otherworldly powers and so forth in this physical symbol. And so they want to see it. But if I told you, now come on, everybody, don't pretend. If I told you, by the way, our teacher got that robe and bowl and brought it to the United States, and it's actually upstairs in a box. So after the lecture, does anybody want to see it? Yeah. Oh, no, I just want the true teaching. Yeah, you'd bring up your little cameras, click, 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 they'd be flashing all over the place. You'd want to see something because it's carrying some kind of gravity to it. And so we don't the robe and bowl. See? It's like in between these lines. Did he show the robe and bowl? Did he not? He questioned me further, it says. How exactly was Huang Mei's teaching transferred? Now, Huang Mei is referring to the fifth patriarch. In other words, the Dharma lineage, the Dharma understanding that's come from the Buddha into China, into the fifth patriarch, and now the sixth. He's wanting to know, how is that passed along? And I replied, there was no transfer. Whoa. So does that mean he didn't get it? Or is he lying? Or is he thinking, I should be with the hunters now because I'm getting into this water here where if they think I got something? But he answers, we merely discussed seeing the nature. We merely discussed jin, seeing the nature. There was no discussion of dhyana, samadhi, or liberation. Now, dhyana, samadhi, and liberation you can just take as a general capsule phrase for meditation practice, okay? But this refers to specific levels or states or degrees, and you might think you can nail them down, but there's many out there that people go through. They're sometimes called the 4 dhyanas and the 4 formless samadhis. And then it goes on and on and on, to the 40 of this and the 60 of that and so forth. But these are delineations of states of single-minded, focused practice that sometimes people use the word lead to absorptions or trances. That's the language that's used. In other words, by generally sitting, although it's not exclusive to sitting, you can use standing and walking and even lying down, you do a particular type of practice where you bring your mental and physical concentration to a single point. Sometimes it's called chitai kagrata, chitai kagrata, which means single focus on one point. And it's a general phrase to cover all these meditative practices. Now he's saying here, we didn't talk about that, which is, in the sense of the language at the time, the way you talk about awakening and bodhi or satori and all these things are talked about. What was your practice? Did you sit? If you sat, what did you do with your mind? What dharma door did you use? And he's pushing this away from the discussion and saying, actually, we didn't talk about that, which would be the standard conversation, you would think. If I meet you and I say, you got the robe and bowl, you were awakened and your teacher certified you, so what did you do? How did you do that? And he said, we didn't do that, we just talked about seeing. So this is a very interesting answer. He's not talking about a particular practice or devotion or ritual or even a yogic exercise. He's talking about something that's happening with a natural opening of the mind to things as they really are that doesn't seem to be hooked exclusively or even maybe significantly to any particular practice. Now, this is a clue to us because if you look ahead, because many people consider this to be the sort of authoritative text on the Chan or the Sitting Meditation School. Now, I just want to encourage you to go ahead and you look. So there should be a lot in here about sitting meditation. On page 51, you'll see, here we got it, the teaching on sitting meditation. And you turn the page and you realize, oh, 2 pages. Whoa, wait a minute. He doesn't talk about how he sits, how long he sits, what does he does when his legs hurt. What's going on here? Okay, so just a heads up for you, if you're waiting for that chapter, you're going to be surprised at its brevity. But this is consistent with him saying that the Buddha nature, the awakened nature, is whole and complete within everyone. And it's only because we get confused and grab on things that we obscure it. Therefore, whatever stops that is a dharma door. And it's not exclusively limited to any particular practice. This is a state of awareness, not a practice per se. There was no transfer. We merely talked about seeing the nature. There was no discussion of dhyana, liberation, samadhi. Yun Sung asked, why was there no discussion about dhyana, samadhi, and liberation? Why didn't you talk about meditation? And I said, because those are dualistic teachings, not the Buddha Dharma. The Dharma of the Buddha is a non-dual Dharma. So here's a very, very important line in the text. It's one of the core teachings, not only of the Sixth Patriarch, but of all the patriarchs, and really of all. Non-dual Chinese is not two, bu-er. So it means that you do not have a division between the sage or the Buddha and ordinary living beings. You do not have a division between later what's called the afflictions or klesha and awakening. You don't have a division between the secular and the sacred. You don't have a division, a duality between inside and outside, this world and other worlds, between time, past, present, and future. Everything is, in this teaching, non-dual. And so the profundity of this is just really, I mean, we'll just scratch the surface a little bit on this tonight. But the implications of this, as far as a philosophy, is really profound, very profound. And I think we've just scratched the surface on it really in investigating what this means. It would mean, for example, between the natural world and our consciousness and mind, they are non-dual. So we think of the environment as something out there, and we think of our consciousness and our awareness as something in here, and our thoughts and our actions and our desires and so forth as being self-contained here. And what this is saying is, no, they're totally interpenetrating. One affects the other. They mutually interrelate. They're non-dual. Wow. So we start to look at this at many levels. You start to see that it can be very, very profound. He says the Dharma of the Buddha is non-dual Dharma. Why does he say those things are dual? The samadhi, dhyana, so forth. Because you think, oh, single-minded concentration. I concentrate mind to singleness. Now I'm non-dual. You're shaking your head no. Why is that non-dual?
So something else to achieve. It's objective kind of perception.
Right, there's still a me doing this. Right, that's one level. What else?
So then it's the opposite, me not doing this.
Does that happen? I'm sorry. just a little humor. What he means by dual is a toggle switch. Now I'm in meditation, now I'm not. I enter meditation, literally that's the language is ru ding. I enter single-minded, and then Marty hits a bell, and I come out. Right? Now, assuming you went in. Well, I kind of went in, but I really came out. But what he's talking about here is a state of mind and awareness that is, in fact, 24/7 non-dual. You are always in a state of clear, seeing equanimity, not something you enter and leave. And by dual, it means you sit, you do, oh, I went to, it's like I went to church on Sunday, and the other 6 days, whoa, I went to, and then I went to church on Sunday again. I'd be good. And it's this toggle back and forth, and he's saying, no, the true mind, the true Dharma is non-dual. It's a way of life. It's a whole way of being. It's not something you turn on and turn off. Or, come on Friday night and do and then, forget it for 5 or 6 days. So this meaning, usually meditation, and that's why they're called trance or absorptions, you enter this. You leave something behind. You bring your senses and your awareness down to this very focused point of concentration, usually in quiet, still place, and you don't want anything to disturb it. And it seems as if this is some kind of awakening. But what the Sixth Patriarch is saying, not necessarily so. This could be, in fact, the opposite. So later he's going to explain that the true meditation is walking, standing, sitting, lying down, being unmoving, clear, focused, and responsive to everything around you without losing your way. A meditation practice. Wow.
Hey, Martin.
Yes.
I can't help myself. Going back up to the first paragraph on that page where he's saying the wind is moving, or the wind is not, it's not the wind that's moving, it's not the pennant that's moving, it's your mind. Isn't that a dualistic statement?
That the wind and mind is. The wind and the pennant are the dualism.
Well, just to say that it's not the wind, it's not the pennant, it's your mind. I mean, that's a pretty dualistic statement.
Saying it's the mind?
Yeah.
Why is that
well, distinguishing between, well, it's not the wind, it's not the pennant. Well, yeah, it's the wind.
I see where you're going. But what he's saying is, in this particular passage, that the mind and the discrimination are the things that are locked. So your mind has, in fact, moved off of its to attach to that. So when he says the mind is essentially non-dual, he's saying that is its primary function. And when you move off of that, you enter duality. And so he's stopping the duality that they're doing there by saying your mind has moved.
I see.
Yeah, and so it's
He's
like,
pointing yeah, I see.
yeah, he's pointing back. So, good question. I don't know how they reacted to that. It was like, mind your own business? You know, who won the debate? And then he goes on, Yun-sung further asks, what is this Buddha Dharma you call the Dharma of non-dualism? And he says, I answered, the Dharma master, meaning Yun-sung, has been lecturing the Nirvana Sutra's elucidation of Buddha nature, the Buddha nature. This is the non-dual Dharma of the Buddha Dharma. So the Buddha nature, this essential nature we all have, is this non-dual Dharma. And this then leads into a whole series of implications. And maybe draw out a little bit in the time. I've been asked to stop on time tonight, so I'll try. So let me pause here and say, what's being talked about is the Buddha nature, this Dharma, the Buddha is a non-dual Dharma. This teaching then maps out and says something to this effect, that the state that we're in right now, both in body and mind and consciousness awareness, is a limited state of awareness and consciousness that we have collapsed down to a me and a mine and a identity of this. What he says later is the mind is vast and great and meant for infinite possibilities. He's talking about the fullness of that nature or consciousness. But in our present state of attaching, grasping, and confusion and whatnot, we shrink it down. And so it's locked in to this. Now further the teaching goes, in fact, the entire realm of existence is a continuum of manifestations of locked-in consciousness or expanded consciousness along a line called 10 realms of existence. So I'm trying to map out a little theory. So it says, the expression is, I told you I was in China and this monk gave me his calligraphy. It was very good. It was 4 characters, Fo Joshu Xin. And it says basically, this mind is Buddha. So this very mind that we are, you know, with ever manifestation one night now, is potentially Buddha. It's not Buddha right now, it's still me. A little bit of Buddha sometimes, but mostly me, right? Or me wanting to be Buddha, which is dualism and so, you know, it's confused. In any event, when it says mind is Buddha, it's saying this very mind has a capacity to be totally awakened, completely understanding and clear. Given attachments and grasping and whatnot, we have shrunk it down. And it says not only this is the human realm, but there's also realms of hells, animals, ghosts, then people, heavens or devas, asuras, and then sagely, and you move in the sage realm of arhats, pratyeka Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So you can go from shrinking it down to almost a pin speck of light, of awareness, up to this great expansive thing of the Buddha. So you hells, animals, up to this, but it's the ultimate what I call plasticity. As we know the concept of neuroplasticity, that the mind is flexible and adaptable and changes and expands and so forth based on, this is plasticity of the nature, that the nature is infinitely plastic, expandable, contractible, and that what we're doing with our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and our habits is playing with that plasticity, either expanding it or contracting it, as we sit, as we think, as we dream. And so what he's teaching is, if the mind is itself Buddha, then you work to expand the measure of that mind to its fullest capacity by taking off the shackles we place upon it. So that's why it says, Fo Joshu Xin, but it also says, Mo Joshu Xin. So, yes, the Buddha, this mind is just the Buddha, but this mind is also just the demon. And you could say, well, Tian Joshu Xin, the heavens are just this mind, and Ren Joshu Xin, human is just this mind. So all these realms are just manifestations of this expanding or contracting consciousness. It's a really central idea, and that's why it says the Dharma realm, meaning all of these, is just this mind. Woo. So this is what it's talking about. So the story I was going to tell tonight, and I'll finish with a story that will take me pretty close to being on time, because if I go over time, then I see the wrinkles coming on foreheads and people doing this, so I'll try to. In some ways, this is very hard for for me, for you, to wrap our minds around, to use a funny expression here. If our minds were fully expansive and unattached and unbound and liberated, it would be like, duh, of course, the Dharma realm is just this mind. But since it isn't the case, and since we become, the idea of paradigm paralysis, we get locked in a paradigmatic way of seeing, we can't imagine that the Dharma realm and this mind have any relationship. We can't even imagine sometimes that we have any relationship to the external world. I mean, there's some people who say, no, human activity has nothing to do with the environment. Okay. And then our relationships with each other. What's wrong with her? What's wrong with him? Well, it's about you. Me? I didn't. We don't even see we have relationships to each other in the natural environment, and sometimes not even ourselves. Sometimes we're so alienated from ourselves, we live in an imaginary world. There's this imaginary me, and then this other me. I don't know what's wrong with him, but the imaginary me has really got it together. So this kind of dualism is built in. So the story that I'm going to tell you, some of you heard the story, but I'll tell it again because I think it really illustrates it. In a time after this teaching, and after this teaching became popular, especially in the Chan and Zen traditions, this body of teachings was the one that was lectured to people on. And at this time, way back, there was an elder monk who was sort of similar to Hui Neng in his understanding and in his charisma, and I mean charisma in the sense of spiritual attractiveness, not Hollywood charisma. He had a large following, and his teaching was this, that this mind is just the Buddha, this mind is just the demon, there's the 10 Dharma realms, and he would give lectures. He says, the Buddha, upon his awakening, his stages of awakening, when his mind was expanding, as he was letting go of, he began to see his past lives. And he saw that in past lives and past lives, he was, in fact, born into, manifested into all these 10 realms. He remembered his past lives being in the realm of animals and ghosts and devas and so on and so forth. And to some extent, the Jataka section of the Tripitaka, the Jataka stories, are the tales of the Buddha's previous lives. So he would talk about this, and he'd say, this life you're this way, but if you're not careful, you could end up human. No way. Yeah. But if you are careful, you could end up being even more or fully human, which is called Buddha. So it all depends on, he would teach like this. And there was at this time a military man, a soldier who was actually a bodyguard to the emperor, so he had pretty high status. And he was also a very devout materialist and secularist and agnostic and atheist. So now I tell this story in Berkeley. I know it's hard for you to imagine there's people like that, but there are. And he said, that's bullshit. That's poppycock about all these other realms. I know this. What I see, what I feel, what I smell, what I taste, I know this to be real. Everything else is just fairy tales and fancy. I don't believe this crap. And this guy is actually doing a disservice to the kingdom because he's misleading people, right? And some of these, he misleads them so much that they want to leave home. They leave home and they don't serve in the military. This is wrong. And so he has all these thoughts. And he says, what's this crap about the Dharma? Not beyond this mind, blah, blah, blah. You can become a ghost, a hell, a deva, yeah, blah, blah, blah. This guy. So he goes to his lecture, and he hears him talking like this. And finally, he can't contain himself anymore, and he just stands up and says, this is a bunch of unsubstantiated, speculation, but he uses coarse language. And he said, I don't believe in any of this. I believe what I can know and see and feel. I don't believe in anything else, and I think you're just really misleading people. There's no such thing as these. And so the elder master at this point stops and realizes, this is not like Yun Sung asking questions. Yun Sung further questioned me. This guy is coming on, and he's pretty powerful. Now, you have to remember, a bodyguard at the emperor of this time has no accountability, and there's a certain impunity that goes with that position. So you can pretty much do what you want, and you're not going to be punished. How's that?
I said it sounds familiar.
Yeah, it has no particular relevance to modern life. So in any ways, the monk then says, well, welcome, welcome, sir. You seem very erudite. Huh? What does that mean? Yeah, I'm that. Okay. And so the monk says, so you don't believe in all this? No, I don't believe in all this stuff. And he says, what do you do, sir? He says, I'm the bodyguard to the emperor. And the monk says, he says, what are you laughing at? He said, you, a bodyguard to the emperor? Whoa, the emperor is in grave danger. He said, you couldn't slice your way out of, I used to say paper bag when I told this story, but it has to be, what do you call that? Rice paper. You couldn't slice your way out of a rice paper bag. Now, rice paper is this paper that's on the little dividers that you have, and it's very thin. If you sneeze on it, sometimes it opens. And so at this point, wow, he walks up, he's totally incensed, he's been insulted, he's been dissed, big time. He grabs a halberd and takes out his sword and just is about to behead the monk. And the monk says, just that is the doorway to the hells. And he pauses. The sword's trembling, and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He puts his sword in, and he's just like, wow. And then he puts his palms together, and he bows to the monk. And the monk says, just that is the gateway to the heavens. Wow. So, and then the monk says, so before you came, you didn't believe in these things, but in less than a minute, you've gone from the realm of the humans to the hells, to the heavens, and now back to the human again. This is what it means, non-dual. And this is what it means, the Dharma realm is not beyond this very mind. And the guy, whoa. So, that's the story, I tell you, to illustrate the teaching of why, on one hand, it's difficult, but on the other hand, it isn't very difficult, because if we take the story and say, moment to moment, thought to thought, day to day, what realm am I really in? You know, when I get consumed by anger, what realm is that? When I get, sort of taken over by lust, whatever form, sex, gambling, whatever it is, what have I done with my consciousness? What realm have I entered? When I get addicted to da-da-da and just go down and out, what realm have I entered? When I sit in meditation, when I repent, when I clear the mind and consciousness, what realm? Is there mutability? Is there plasticity going on? And if you can take that little example and expand it, and don't put time limits on it of past, present, and future, say it's without end, it's just going on, you can see the dynamic of how this thing would work. That in fact, there's constant change, but it isn't random. It isn't helter-skelter. It's actually within our power to direct. And that's what cultivation is all about, is just taking charge of that process that generates those thoughts, that generate those states of being that manifest in, not just in states of mind, but actually states of mind and body at some point. We actually become what we think. Anyhow, that's a little bit. Next week is our last class for the semester, and I have a plan to finish up the first semester, so there's closure, which is also dual, because in non-dual there's no closure, there's no opening. But that being said, I'll try to finish the first chapter next week, and then we'll take a break and start again in January. I'm not sure, middle of January about? Third or fourth week of January? Okay, we'll pick up again. If you have any questions, save them for next week, because if we open that door now, then I won't be even close to finishing on time. Any announcements?
Tomorrow, as usual, we start at 9 o'clock, Cafe Chan, with compassion represents, 1 o'clock, Sutra Stain recitation,
Mm-hmm.
2 o'clock, Dharma instruments, lesson, 3 o'clock, calligraphy lesson,
What's 3 o'clock?
calligraphy lesson,
Oh, calligraphy.
calligraphy lesson, 5 o'clock meditation, 6:30 gift ceremony, 7:30 lecture.
Wow.
Lunch in the middle of all that. You don't want to come for the whole day, you come for lunch.
Oh, and there's lunch.
Yeah.
I'm specializing in that Dharma door now. One door deeply, all connect, right? I'm going to go through the lunch door. Okay. We'll do the transfer in English right now.
Okay, speaking of, we have some case in the back. So after this, after the bowing, we invite you to go to the back. We have some vegan cake. Do we have dumplings for you?
No.
Okay.
Somebody ate them already. Ding, Li, San, Bao.